What's up, YouTube fans? Today, we're going to do a comparison of the DX9 Henry with the FansToys Magnum, both versions of a masterpiece Wildrider. So these figures were released about 2 years apart, DX9 in 2018 and FansToys in 2020. I actually had to go back and confirm that because it didn't seem right, but this was in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. FansToys was still putting out figures. As I always mention with these comparisons, I try to be as objective as possible, but of course there's subjectivity involved with comparisons like this. So if I pick the one that you don't prefer, then you win. I really do these comparisons to try to help people who haven't decided which direction they want to go or which figure set they want to go with, especially since these are combiners. So with that being said, let's start the review and we'll start off with accessories. So here are the accessories they come with. Not a lot here, so this should be pretty quick. I do want to mention they both come with a collector's card. They're both nice credit card style quality and they look good. Since I haven't reviewed Henry, I did want to show this, but they're not accessories you can use with the figure. Here are the accessories. They both come with a gun. They're both sculpted pretty well. FansToys has some paint on it. And what you're left with is the extra face for FansToys. So you get that yelling face. So we're going to give accessories over to FansToys just by a single accessory. All right, next we're going to talk about the cartoon accuracy. In order to do that, we're going to put the G1 cartoon here so you can take a look at that. And when it comes to these two figures, they both do some things really well when it comes to the cartoon. So for example, the chest, they both have the squared off piece with this rectangle in the middle. But the FansToys, they did the bottom part of it and left off the top part. You know, there should be a white piece missing here or a silver piece. Whereas the DX9 did the top part, but kind of left out or made the bottom part smaller. And then the square in the middle is really tiny. It's just that tiny little square. They both have this element here with the lines. So that looks good. They both have the hip skirts that are kind of very similar to the cartoon. They both have these things on their knees. They both have the little accent pieces on their toes. They both have the wheels on the side. They both have the coloring on the arms. So they're really similar in terms of their looks. Even the face sculpts, both of them are pretty well done. The shape of the head is pretty well done as well. Going to the side, they're both pretty small profile. So I'm going to give them a tie on cartoon accuracy. I think they just both kind of hit it. Now here's something that's a little bit interesting here. They both tower over the Takara Carbots. Here he is with Blue Streak. Now I'm going to show you an image here with Blue Streak and Wildrider next to each other in the cartoon, the Sunbow chart. And you can see that it is supposed to be taller. The question is, should it be this much taller or this much taller? So I'll leave that up to you. Me personally, I prefer the height of the FansToys. I want it to be taller but not huge. The DX9 is just a little bit too big. But either way, they're both bigger and they should be. So I'm going to give them a tie on cartoon accuracy. All right, next we'll talk about the sculpt of these two figures. And again, they both do some things similarly. They both do things right and they both do things that I don't love. So FansToys, I do like the way the chest looks. I like the translucent pieces. There is sculpted detail behind the translucent pieces. That's just a nice attention to detail both here and here. I do like the smoothness of the arms. I don't love these sticking out. They don't bother me. They just do... They stick out a little bit. This backpack is a little bit bigger on the FansToys than it is on the DX9. DX9 has a much cleaner back. But both have relatively small backpacks considering the transformations pretty clean. So I kind of like things on both. I think they both kind of do things right. They both do the head, the sculpting right on the head and the arms. So I'm going to give them a tie on sculpt. All right, next we're going to talk about the paint on these figures. And when it comes to paint, FansToys almost always tends to win. The DX9 does have quite a bit of paint, much more than I was expecting. So all this red you see here is painted even on the sides of the body, which they did a good job on there. Pretty clean over here. There is a little bit of paint down here. This is plastic here. These are plastic here. In the midsection there is plastic. The white is plastic. The blue is painted on the chest. Going to the side there, this, I can't tell, I think it's plastic. The mid of the arms are plastic. The face is painted, the top of the head is painted, the bottom is just plastic. So it's kind of got a mix. The FansToys is pretty much 100% painted all the way around. Everything I can see pretty much is painted. So this is kind of no-brainer. We'll give paint to FansToys. Next, we'll talk about the build on these two figures. And again, FansToys kind of sets themselves apart because their figures just feel so solid. First off, it's got a ton of die cast. A lot of this leg down here, the feet, and some of the hardware in here on the front, all die cast. A little bit in the arms and a little bit on the interior hardware. And it just ends up giving it a premium feel and quality. The transformation is really kind of nice and fun. I like it personally. It does come together solidly. And I don't have anything that feels it's going to break. The only thing I don't like is these ankles are a little bit wacky, but if you push them backwards, it does kind of solidify his stance. For the DX9, you can see he's got a little bit of a bobblehead, and I've had that trouble before on some of these other DX9 figures, just things not being perfectly toleranced. Same for legs here, so these are on drop-down joints, and you can push them in, but sometimes they just drop on their own. They're not loose per se, but it would have been nice to have a satisfying click, like clicks in and it stays. This ab crunch is also a little bit loose. We'll talk about that in articulation. But those aren't big issues in terms of quality. You know, there's no QC problems. But those are just tiny little tolerance things that tend to set FansToys apart from companies like DX9. So I'm going to give build quality over to FansToys. I just think it feels like an overall more solid figure. All right, next we'll talk about the articulation on these two figures. In order to do that, we'll go through their articulation very quickly. The DX9 head is on a rotating swivel. Or no, I'm sorry, it is a ball joint. So it rotates all the way around. You get side to side. The ears actually move up and down a little bit just because of the way they transform out of the head. And you get up to there and down to there. The shoulders rotate all the way around. They go up on this joint here, although it's very tight, hard to move. You can't get it up on that joint. Just be careful what you're holding because you don't want to press down on this glass here. And you can also go up on this joint on the outside. So there's two double jointed basically for the shoulder. You have a rotation at the bicep. Double jointed elbow gives you the full bend. Rotation at the wrist. And the wrist has this in and out movement. It does sometimes tend to knock out the peg on the arm. And then this is what I mentioned during the build quality. It's not bad, it just does get loose relatively easily. You do get individually articulated fingers, but they're only articulated one pen, so you're unfortunately stuck with the bent fingers and the bent thumb. But you can't get it around the gun. Continuing down your rotation at the waist, ab crunch all the way down to there. That's quite a bit more of movement. You have hip skirts here, kind of ugly. Don't love the way they did this, but it works. Goes up to there, back to there, out to the side, all in friction. Like I mentioned earlier, this drop-down joint is a little bit on the loose side, but it's okay. Rotation at the thigh. Single jointed knee gets you 90 degrees. Ankle tilt. Let's see. You have, ankle tilt back and forth and backward and forward. So quite a bit of movement on that foot there. And then the toe itself can also move on its own. Moving to FansToys, the head is on a rotating swivel. So you get up to there, down to there, rotates all the way around. No movement on the ears and no side to side on the head. The shoulders can rotate up to here. Only a single joint there, no inner joint on this one. Rotation at the upper bicep on a ratchet. Rotation at the bicep. You have I want to say double jointed. It's really tight though. Yes, double jointed elbow. I don't know why, maybe it was just super tight, but you get a double jointed elbow. You have a rotation at the wrist. You have individually articulated fingers at 2 pins, and then the thumb is on a ball joint. So a little bit nicer on these hands compared to the DX9. Your rotation at the waist. No ab crunch, unfortunately, on this figure. You have 2 hip skirts here on a ratchet, goes up to there, back to there, out to the side on friction. All of those joints are really nice and tight and feel really good. Much better than DX9 movement there. Rotation at the thigh. Double jointed knee gets you the full bend, so you get much further. Ankle tilt out to there. Ankle pivot, if you could rock it down on this, you can get the full ankle pivot and you can get a heel tilt as well. So given that FansToys has a bit more articulation, double jointed knee, as well as the movement in the foot and also the movement in the hands, those are some pretty good articulation. The DX9 does have better articulation because it's on the waist, because it's got the ab crunch. So given that this has 1 point better articulation for the ab crunch, a little bit better than the shoulders, whereas FansToys has got the better hands and the better legs, lower legs. We're going to give them a tie on articulation. I think they both kind of even each other out in where they articulate. Next, we'll talk about the transformation and engineering. So when it comes to transformation, there are some frustrating parts on the FansToys where you tend to just really need to push pretty hard, especially when you're going back from vehicle mode to robot mode. It just fits together so tightly that you really need a spudger. There's no way around it. The DX9, on the other hand, you can get most of it apart without a spudger. Like I mentioned, there are some panels that are a bit looser, but because it's just a little bit more simpler of a transformation, it tends to be a little bit easier. So I'm going to give transformation over DX9. I just think they did a better job on the transformation overall and just making it a fun transformation. When it comes to engineering, though, I'm going to give that to FansToys, and the main reason, which we haven't seen yet, is the alt mode. The alt mode is actually, the car is almost the same size, whereas the robot mode is this taller bot. So that's kind of that engineering magic that FansToys have put in to make this mass shift. So because of that, I'm going to give engineering over to FansToys. So there we have both of them in their alt mode. And both of them really capture that look of the G1 cartoon, which we'll put up there for you to take a look at. There is something about the FansToys vehicle that just stands out. I think it's the paint and the coloring. But they have all the same, cues. They both have the pop-up headlights. The FansToys happens to have the translucent, whereas the DX9 has the painted. Although the FansToys lights are actually angled and have a curvature to the back, whereas these are just straight plastic. So it ends up looking a little bit cheaper, but still it looks okay. The front, they both have the grills and the little turn signals and tail lights and all that, or headlights and all that, so that all looks fine. Coming to the side here, they both have the painted stripe down the side. The DX9 does have opening doors, which actually will be a little hard to get it out now. If you use a spudger, you could probably get it out a little bit easier. There we go. So you can't open up the doors. That's a cool little feature. You don't have that here on the FansToys. They both have the rear view mirrors. They both have the painted taillights. FansToys has painted metallic red and yellow, whereas the DX9 is yellow and then translucent red. They both have exhaust back here. FansToys has a little bit more junk in the trunk here, but overall very, very similar. They did paint this back window red here, whereas on DX9 they didn't paint. It's just silver. The rims are also different. The DX9 used just this kind of old school looking die-cast wheels, whereas the FansToys went with the chrome look. I think the chrome look just looks a lot snazzier. They both have the translucent red for the glass. They also can both mount the weapon in the vehicle mode. So while they're both very similar in terms of their vehicle mode, I think the FansToys just shines a little bit better. Overall, it just comes out cleaner and looks a little bit more like a model car versus a toy car. So we're going to give alt mode over to FansToys. So the final factor here is the cost. DX9 comes in at $100 retail. The FansToys comes in at $110 retail. If you bought it later, you actually probably paid even more than that. Either way, DX9 is going to win the cost category. So final thoughts on this comparison. You can see the score there. FansToys is going to win this one. And I expected that to happen, but what I didn't expect is that DX9 actually hold their own in several categories in this comparison. There was quite a few ties and even some wins. Now, I think they did a great job on the transformation, the overall simplicity, but yet it looks good in both modes. And even the sculpt and the accuracy is pretty well done. So those kind of surprised me. For the price, you do end up getting a pretty good figure. But for me personally, this FansToys Magnum is one of my favorite FansToys figures. It really just stands out. It shines. It looks really good. So you have to pick the one that you like. Me personally, I like what FansToys have to offer on these Stunticons, so I'm sticking with them for my Stunticon set. For combined mode, I may be going with DX9. I haven't gotten all 5 members yet. I'm still waiting for their Menasor, but we'll take a look at that as soon as we get it. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.